Alrighty, so I figured I would go over the newest spawn and whether or not I think it's worth it. Also wanted to point out they came out with an official Unison League ambassador sticker, which I will be equipping basically forever. So if you're ever wondering if it's actually me or not, I'll have this sticker equipped. So, the actual spawn itself, we have Lale. She is a prio monster that reduces stats by 100%. She removes enemy buffs, applies debuff removal resistance one time, applies chipped blade, which is a special debuff, for 60 seconds, and then all allies reduces incoming damage to 0 7 times. Iron Wall, which is a combination buff. It applies things like resurrection, it applies 40% damage reduction to magic and physical stuff like a barrier. So it's a combination of a couple different things, but the most important thing that it does is resurrection. It applies Phalanx to you, which is just a bubble that gives you cost and unison when it pops and prevents you from getting hit with status ailments and stuff like that. Guilty Eclipse, which nullifies buff effects on the enemy, blocks healing, increasing effects, and reduces action speed and reduces HP recovery effects on the enemy field for 90 seconds. She awakens to 40k stats, which is horrible. She gets Grace, which is kind of nice. Frozen resistance by 60, confuse and prohibit resistance, prohibit uni resistance by 70. I will just start off with like PvE. As a free-to-play player or anything like that, this monster is 200 gems to get total, and you guarantee her at the end. So that's nice. The actual monster, though, for PvE is pretty bad. You're basically only getting the minus 80% and Iron Wall and the 7 hits to 0. She doesn't really give any buffs. She doesn't increase damage that you'll deal. The action speed can be nice for difficult quests, but there are better enemy fields that you could apply. And throwing this monster just for that seems pretty weak. She also only awakens to 40k, which is really bad. Overall for PvE, not a good monster. I'd say 2 out of 10. And really bad for free-to-play players in PvE. For free-to-play players or new players, this is like a 0 out of 10. Just avoid this, because you want monsters that will buff your damage. As a free-to-play or a new player, your damage is already really, really low. So you want monsters that will buff your damage. And this monster doesn't buff your damage at all. So she's not going to help you complete things like the normal quests or any of the really difficult quests. Just avoid her. Now, when it comes to PvP, I think that she has some value. The biggest thing is the chipped blade and the inability to remove the chipped blade. But in something like PvP, why would you not throw a monster that just instantly kills the enemies? So it's kind of weird. She is a prio monster, though. So let's say on round 3, if a bunch of people are throwing unis and you throw this uni, at least your monster is guaranteed to go off. The thing that I am not satisfied with, though, is she doesn't protect your team from getting hit with status ailments. So even though she prevents the enemies from buffing and stuff like that with her field, and she doesn't apply anything to the enemy field to prevent them from gaining a field. She doesn't take crest. She doesn't boost your your resistance is to getting hit with things like Uni Prohibit. So even though she does awaken to Uni Prohibit resistance, she doesn't boost your resistances to anything. She basically is just preventing the enemies from killing you, and I guess increasing the amount of damage that you can deal kind of right off the bat. Is she a good enough monster, though, that I would recommend throwing her? I mean, as a round 3 throw, if a bunch of people are throwing unis, I could see her being useful in something like PvP. But generally speaking, I would just throw a monster that kills the enemies. She's definitely not an end-all be-all, but I think she's okay. For general players, I'd say that she's probably a 5 out of 10, just for the flexibility of throws if a bunch of people are throwing monsters all at the same time. But she doesn't awaken into anything that will protect you besides the Unison Prohibit. So she doesn't give you defenses or anything like that. And she awakens to 40k as well. I mean, she's just a really, really defensive monster. And historically, defensive monsters are absolutely garbage in PvP. The best monsters have always been the monsters that kill the enemies. And defensive monsters, when I compare this monster, for example, to Durg, there's a massive difference in strength. Right? So, like, let's compare her to Durg. Durg also does not awaken into uni defense, like fire resistance or anything like that. But at least he awakens to something like fire element. He applies Miracle, which is way, way more powerful than Resurrection. Basically, if you don't know, Resurrection just recovers your HP. Miracle, and it leaves you only with 60 HP. Miracle will put you back at 100 HP and 100% CP as well. Durg also boosts your status ailment resistance, which is what I was talking about earlier, so that your team doesn't get hit with things like Prohibit Unison or Slumber or Insanity, stuff like that. He also prevents you guys from getting stripped. He applies Fortify, which is massive. People don't understand how powerful Fortify is against super high damaging unis. It allows your team to survive against these kill unis. Even the weaker people on your team should be able to survive. He also takes Crest, and the crest that he takes is a defensive crest for your entire team. So if the enemies have already had Crest or something like that, then he takes Crest and he boosts your team's defense. When I compare this monster with a monster like Durg, it's obvious who's more powerful. The only thing that I really see in this monster is the chipped blade, but I don't like it because there are so many things that remove special debuffs as part of their kit. So even if like 1 or 2 unis goes off on the enemy team, most likely they will be able to remove the chipped blade even with the special debuff resistance of 1 time. So really, really dislike it. Overall, though, I think she can be kind of useful in some situations. For free-to-play players, though, it's not worth this. This monster is just like pretty garbage in PvP. A monster like Durg would be much, much better because you're gonna die regardless. As a free-to-play player or a new player, as soon as a uni goes off, you're basically dead. So I guess in that aspect, she's good. But most people are going to be attacking you in round 1 and round 2, potentially also in round 3. So generally speaking, people who are free to play or new players get uni really, really fast. And in those circumstances, you want to be able to throw a uni that will do a lot to enable your team to kill, because usually even right after you uni, you're probably ending up dead. So you want to make sure that your team can finish the job, and this monster does not enable your team by much. I mean, the chipped blade is basically all that it does, but if your teammates fail to snipe the enemies, it's useless. Now, it's something like Guild Battle. This is kind of interesting, but I still think that it's bad. The reasons are you're not uni boosting, so you can't really use this in round 1 as part of your general throw. Now, I could see that potentially you could throw this monster right before the enemies go into something like Crystal Assault, but I don't like it for a few reasons. Like, this monster doesn't apply, it doesn't take away the enemy's crest. So if the enemy's setting up and they've applied crest, it doesn't take that away. It also doesn't prevent the enemies from having a buff on their side, a field. There are monsters that have where you have to throw 2 field monsters in order to get your field. It doesn't prohibit that. It basically just allows your team to survive a little bit longer. But as a first round throw, you really want to uni boost your team. Uni boosting your team and de-uniing the enemy team, reducing their uni and their ability to uni, are super, super valuable. Things like blind, insanity, slumber, rejection are all really useful because they prevent the enemies from gaining uni or being able to control their character really well. This monster basically just debuffs them. And although there are merits to that, especially in round 1, it's not super useful. So I don't like this monster as a round 1 throw. It doesn't really boost your team, doesn't really prevent the enemies from doing their thing. We're kind of missing some stuff. So round 1, I'd say she's like a 3 out of 10. When it comes to round 2 and round 3, I think, like in a clash, I think that this monster could be used in concert with a monster like Durg, because they do different things, right? Durg will apply buffs that this monster, that Leil doesn't apply. But then you're basically locked into a fire-water throw. And a lot of people are using a lot of water, specifically to counter things like Pandora. So it is kind of a weird situation. I do like it because it applies Iron Wall, which applies Resurrection. And if you use this monster in concert with something like Durg, who also gives you Miracle, Resurrection plus Miracle plus Fortify plus minus 80 buff on the enemies. And there are other prio monsters as well that you don't have to pair it with Durg necessarily, but there's a lot of merit to that type of throw. However, I'm still falling short here because we still need to prevent the enemy from gaining something like a field. Remember, a field will boost their stats, and with higher stats comes more damage out of unis. So even if you throw this monster and Durg, the likelihood of you surviving 5 enemy unis is basically 0 nowadays. Without a field protect on your side, even with something like Crest, even with an enemy field, we're still missing a lot of things. So in that aspect, I really dislike it. The ability, like the disability of the enemies to gain buff effects, is kind of interesting. And you could argue that in like round 1 and the clash, it could be very useful. However, without a de-protect on the enemy side, without something that prevents the enemies from gaining a field where they have to throw 2 fields, basically, this monster becomes much, much worse. If this monster had a de-protect on the enemy side where they had to throw 2 fields because the first one would get canceled, this monster would actually be quite strong in guild battles. But as a solo throw as part of a clash, I'd prefer something like Durg. You're basically only using this because it counters Pandora, which is a fire monster. So if you're throwing like a monster like Durg, that gets countered by water, which is very, very common right now. So I basically only like it for that. It's like a temporary thing. This monster isn't going to be a long-term monster. So in something like Guild Battle, as a second round throw, you know, maybe 6 out of 10. She applies some really unique things, but she's really not going to help you survive. If you lose the clash, you're basically dead anyway. So in that aspect, she's basically useless. It's just, yeah. Overall, I'd say this monster is great as a kind of temporary monster, and I'll get to why. Because for a lot of people, they weren't able to get something I'll talk about in just a second. So you're probably going to end up getting this monster as a new or a free-to-play player anyway. And in that aspect, I think that it's like an okay keepsake monster. I think she's like a nice secondary monster to have, but I wouldn't upgrade her or anything, like awaken her. Overall, though, she's probably like 3 out of 10. She'll probably be forgotten and overlooked in a week or two. Now, the weapons that you'll get are the shuddering weapons. They are kind of nice for newer players. For long-term players, these are weapons that are garbage. The ability power just isn't there, and the extra boost isn't there. You're also missing things like Unigain. It's just bad. But for new players, it is nice because the ability success value, plus it's not too hard to get maxed. So in some aspects, it's nice, but mainly the cost and the HP gain are super useful for new players. So you'll probably end up spawning this anyway for the defense gear. So it's kind of, it's like a okay, because you're probably going to get this anyway. Undying Aggression is really, really good. It is dual attack plus resurrection as an opener. You only need one of these. And it is absolutely, worth getting one of these, especially as a new player. This will help you in difficult quests. This will help you in PvP, in guild battles. You can use this everywhere, and you'll be able to use it for a long time. Because it does two things, it's very flexible, and it is nice. So in that aspect, I would say absolutely, this is a really, really good spawn just to get this. And I am pretty sure you get a guaranteed defense piece. So you are basically going to be, in order to get this right here, you're missing the 35 plus the 25. So for 140 gems, you can get a guaranteed defense gear. So at that point, since you've already basically done the entire thing, it's probably worth finishing it off for just the weapon and the monster. But it's kind of up to you. The main reason to spawn it, honestly, is just this defense gear, just to get one of them. As a long-term player, though, you've probably already spawned the older one. This came out a while ago. Let's see if I can... So this one came out a while ago. If you already have this, it's not worth spawning at all. But this is basically the only reason to spawn this, which is why I was basically saying that you'll probably end up getting this monster anyway. It is absolutely worth 140 gems to get this defense gear. So at the bare minimum, I'd recommend getting the defense gear. I wouldn't spawn beyond that. If you do one cycle, 200 gems, that's also good. But I wouldn't go to the point where you can actually exchange, because you're probably going to end up spending 600 plus gems in order to get this. And none of these are really worth it. The only things that you're really doing are getting the defense gear. So, yeah. Alrighty. I will catch you guys later.